When we find a bone fragment, how do we know that it came from something really old, instead of being a bone from an animal that died just a short time ago or a bone that someone deliberately planted? Do they look different enough to tell? These are great questions. There are several ways that we can tell that the bones we find are really old. Dr. Lee Berger, anthropologist at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, explains how fossils are formed.
Once they're underground and buried within one of these environments, they're protected, and then they're surrounded by some of the most lime-rich or calcium carbonate-rich soil you could ever get. And then, over time, they're impregnated by the minerals that surround them. And as gentle water saturates these wet and humid environments, those minerals can be transported into the calcium phosphate that is the bone, and you get replacement that goes on. Replacement calcium phosphate with calcium carbonate, maybe manganese impregnates there, and eventually you turn a bone into what we would term a fossil. And obviously in that there's huge degrees, from something that's just started to something that's turned into effectively nothing like the original, but a perfect cast of it.
Dr. Berger has hit on two important features that help us determine that the bones we find are indeed very old fossils. Number one, where they are found, and number two, what the bones contain. Let's look at this first way that has to do with where they are found. As lead anthropologist at the Gladysville cave site, Dr. Kanole Molepioni, or Dr. Kenny for short, explains.
So how do you tell the difference between a fossilized tooth or a modern tooth? Pretty easy to answer, because if it's a modern tooth, it would not be encased in Brecha, because that process takes a very, very long time to occur. So if you do find anything in Brecha, you know that it is fossilized. It comes from 100 million years ago, at least. Modern material wouldn't be encased in Brecha at all.
Dr. Kenny mentioned that new bones are not encased in Brecha. What is Brecha? Here we see Dr. Kenny analyzing some Brecha from the cave. You can see that it is a very hard cement-like rock consisting of many minerals and rock fragments along with fossils. It turns out that Brecha takes a long time to form and is as solid as cement. New bones falling to the ground, even hundreds of years ago, will not be encased in solid Brecha-like rock. So that is one way that we know they are very old. The second way has to do with what the bones contain. Dr. John Hawks, anthropologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, explains.
You can take the active ingredients that went into this, right, and make something that's like a concrete that has got fossils in it, and you could, with heat and temperature, cause some transformation to the bone, right? However, the processes that we're studying here have happened over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. It's water slowly dripping in, and that creates a chemistry that's different that we can recognize, and when we look at bones like this, we have lots of indicators that they are ages that go way back in the past, right? You can take a bone that's from a today animal and put it in heat, put it in temperature, put it in water, cement it together, but you're not getting rid of the carbon that's in it. That carbon is still there, and that carbon has carbon-14 in it, and that carbon-14 has a decay, a half-life of 57-30 years. So we can look at that immediately and say, wait, there's something wrong with this. This is not super old, right? We can date it.
You can learn more about how carbon-14 dating works in another video on this site. So it's easy to tell just by looking at the type of carbon in the fossilized bone that it is much older than even a few thousand years. When we find these fossils, we can feel very confident that they indeed came from organisms that lived and died long, long ago.